But I think there's an expectation in the market, certainly with US investors or people invested in US equities in the uranium space, that this will see an immediate bump. Now, the reality is whatever is determined, let's say it's positive, it's still going to take the company, I'm told by the CEO, 5-6 years for them to actually, optimize, that decision. Do you think that the US uranium equities are going to see a bump, or is it just business as usual and this has just been a discussion which has been, put out there and people are going to, crack on as normal?
No, it's had a fundamental effect on the market. And the reason is that the utilities basically, their contracting cycles became frozen. And that was a word that they used often with us when we visited them, that our contracting is now frozen, because no one's going to sign a contract with the utility saying, well, we'll agree to this price, but if the 232 goes a certain way, we're going to have to rip up the contract. So their view was, there's no point writing the contract. And you also have to remember that the utility spent an inordinate amount of time dealing with the petition. So we know that there were hundreds, if not thousands, of man hours spent on the petition, the original submissions, and the DOC questionnaire.
But doing what? Time spent doing what? I mean, how are they trying to influence that?
No, actually, writing submissions. The DOC questionnaire, I don't know if you ever saw it, but no. Thank God we're not an American company, because I would have had to hire 20 people, right? I know that the number of man hours, I can't disclose it because these conversations are in private, but the number of man hours that the utility spent just on the DOC questionnaire were extraordinary. I mean, they really were full time on this issue. And so I mean, the DOC now has one of the best databases on earth in terms of all the utilities in America now, because the questionnaire is extraordinary. The depth they were asking. They're asking to go back 10 years on your contracts. Now imagine a company like Exelon with 26 units. We want to see 10 years of contracts for 26 units. That's 260 years of contracts that they have to go fish out of their whatever they keep them in.
Right. So the DOC is treating this seriously. It's a serious consideration, but in the context of all the other energy suppliers out there.
Sorry, there was one other thing I wanted to add, and I think you hinted on it. So once this is finished, and I'm sorry I went off on a tangent, but as I said, I'm ADHD. Once this is finished, the certainty will come back into the market. They'll know what the playing field is. They can see into the future. Say it is a 25% quota. Say that's what comes out. Well, they're going to know that in the next 5 years and maybe even 10 years, they're going to have to buy that uranium somewhere else. And so the certainty will come back to the market. Now, the utilities have been inactive for almost 18 months. And their uncovered positions in 21 and 22 jumped by 30%. So they got to get their skates on. And so I think what you'll see is, now that we have certainty on the playing field, they're going to start writing contracts again. Now, my belief is that we are never going to see a spot price surge like we saw in 07. I think what you're going to see is that the spot price will be dragged up by the contracts.
Right. Interesting.
That's probably because the spot price, as we know, is an arbitrage market.
Of course.
We know that, right? It's not a true spot market in any sense of the word. So the spot market will always follow contracts. So if the spot players can get, they'll pay whatever it is to make a margin to sell it into a contract. So I think that's what you're going to see certainty return. And my view is, if certainty returns, you'll see contracts getting written. And we know from Cameco, who's one of the lowest cost producers on the cost curve, we know that the price has to be higher.
To a degree, is it also controlled by where the end user chooses to buy their energy from? So that's what the utilities have, got in the back of their mind. You
mean the customer, the guy turning his lights off and on in the house?
Exactly.
Well, I think the issue is America. It is right now. It's the biggest market, and China's doing what they can to catch up. And by I think 2030, they'll supersede America. France has announced that they're going to push back their nuclear shutdown for 10 years, which is that's just a typical politician kicking it down the road for another decision. The interesting thing is that we're seeing in some American states now that non-emitting credits, zero emission credits are now being given to nuclear power plants, right? So I think we'll start seeing as the climate change crisis, if you want to call it that. I'm a geologist, but the crisis, the Scientology, as it consumes people's psyches and they're looking for answers, you're seeing more and more people turning to nuclear saying, well, actually, you know, when we look at it scientifically, it's not nearly as dangerous as we thought, and it's actually really efficient, and we should be looking at nuclear power. You're looking at small modular reactors, which I think in the next 10 years will be commercialized. And way down the track, you're looking at fusion. I think that's a long way off. But I think what you'll see is that nuclear energy in the OECD countries will remain static, but in the non-OECD countries, you're going to see a lot of growth. So I think people are worrying more about, you know, how that energy is being produced than they are really about the cost. I mean, that's obvious.
That's a big topic, and perhaps we can come back to that another time, because it's a very emotive subject. When we know this from the feedback we've had from, you know, our YouTube subscribers and on Twitter, people, it's this whole clean energy versus toxic waste coming together, and you know, both sides are intransient.
There was a good. Can I just say something? I really love the fact that you put out there on Twitter that you're going to interview me and people engaged and ask questions. I just think that's fantastic, and I love it. I love interacting with your followers, but also the followers on Twitter. I just wanted to put that out there, and I lost my train of thought completely.
Okay.
Well, something. Oh, I know what it was. There was something on Twitter that I retweeted, and It was an article on how much waste is actually out there.
Yeah, is this the Coke can one?
Ever? No, that's how much a person requires for an entire lifetime.
Right.
No, it's 370,000 tons of waste. Now that sounds like a lot, but there's about 20 million tons of solar panels in China alone that will become waste in about 20 years. You know, leaving that aside. So that would fill a soccer pitch to about 3 meters high, 10 feet. That's how much waste there is. There's nothing. You know, it's not an issue. But when you look into the spent fuel and you look into safety and you look into nuclear power in terms of how much power it delivers for how little fuel it uses scientifically and not emotionally, then you start to go. And Mike Schellenberger is a great example. I mean, he was I don't know if you know who Michael is, but he's a great blogger. Ran for the governor of California to highlight the fact that they were shutting down the nuclear power plants. But he's a convert. And like all converts, he's very loud about it. But he was a person who an environmentalist, very intelligent, wanted wind and solar, started looking into it and said, gosh, these things just aren't going to give us what we thought they would. We need to look at nuclear. So that's happening more and more. You can actually wear a shirt saying I'm a uranium miner now, and you know, people come up and ask you questions, and the biggest response they always say is, gosh, I didn't know that.